The first thing she felt was the glare of the glass walls, bright with daytime sun, turning the office into a stage where fear had nowhere to hide. Her hands trembled against the smooth conference table, and in her chest the words, "Please don't hurt me," beat louder than her heart, even though no sound left her mouth. Outside the 42nd floor, the city moved calmly under blue skies, unaware that a young woman named Alara Moyne was standing at the edge of her life, facing a man whose wealth could crush silence into law. This was not a moment of screaming or violence. It was the quiet terror of power imbalance, the kind that grows in daylight and leaves no visible bruises, only shadows that follow you home. If you believe that kindness deserves second chances and that compassion can interrupt even the coldest systems, please take a moment to like this video, comment your thoughts, share it with someone who needs hope, and subscribe to the channel Wisdom of Kindness. Your support keeps stories like this alive. Alara had arrived at the tower early that morning, sunlight warming the pavement as she crossed the plaza with a folder pressed to her chest. She was 22, newly employed as a compliance intern at Aurelian Systems, a company known for innovation, speed, and the unapproachable brilliance of its CEO, Rowan Calder. Rowan was a daytime legend, photographed at charity luncheons and tech summits, his smile practiced, his voice calm, his influence wide enough to bend outcomes before questions were asked. Alara had grown up watching men like him on screens, believing success meant safety, believing that rules protected those who followed them. She had not learned yet how rules could be arranged to look protective while quietly failing the vulnerable. The challenge began as something small and almost invisible. An assignment that kept expanding, expectations that shifted without notice, pressure delivered as praise. Alara stayed late, drank cold coffee, smiled when corrected, nodded when overwhelmed. She needed the job. Her mother's medical bills stacked like silent reminders at home, and the idea of starting over felt impossible. Each day unfolded under bright office lights, daytime routines marching forward, and with them came the sense that she was being tested not for competence, but for compliance. The office corridors gleamed, the elevators whispered, and fear learned how to wear a professional face. The turning point came during a midday meeting scheduled under the pretense of mentorship. Alara walked into the conference room as sunlight poured in, the city below alive with movement. And she realized too late that the space was empty except for Rowan. The air felt thin. He spoke of loyalty, of gratitude, of how careers could accelerate or stall depending on attitude. There were no explicit threats, only implications arranged like furniture. Alara felt herself shrink, the weight of his status pressing against her ribs. She thought of her mother waiting for medication, of the rent due, of the promises she had made to herself about endurance. The words, "Please don't hurt me," echoed in her mind again, a prayer without sound. Days passed, and the struggle deepened. Alara stopped sleeping well. She jumped at email notifications. Her work remained excellent, but her spirit felt bruised. She considered quitting, then imagined the consequences. She considered reporting, then pictured the labyrinth of procedures, the subtle reputations, the cost of being labeled difficult. Daytime kept arriving relentlessly, sunlight exposing everything, including her isolation. What changed was not a sudden act of heroism, but a small human interruption. A senior facilities manager named Tomas. Iqbal noticed her sitting alone in the cafeteria one afternoon, the sun slanting across the tables, her untouched lunch growing cold. Tomas was not powerful. He was observant. Tomas did not offer solutions or speeches. He offered presence. Over several lunches he listened. He shared stories of his early days in the company, of mistakes made and quiet injustices endured. He explained processes without embellishment, the realities of documentation, the importance of allies. He reminded her that daylight was not only for exposure, but also for clarity. Alara began to write things down. She saved emails. She learned the difference between fear and evidence. The struggle remained, but it shifted from silent endurance to careful preparation. Rowan Calder, meanwhile, lived in a world that rewarded speed over reflection. His days were full, his calendar dense, his reputation immaculate. He had learned to mistake efficiency for righteousness. When concerns finally reached the board through proper channels, supported by timelines and witnesses, they arrived not as accusations but as patterns. Daylight meetings followed. Independent reviews were commissioned. Rowan felt the first unfamiliar sensation of resistance not as an attack but as a pause. In that pause, he saw himself from a distance, not as a villain, but as a man who had allowed power to dull empathy. The investigation unfolded under the same bright skies that had witnessed Alara's fear. There were no dramatic confrontations, no raised voices. There was accountability. Rowan faced consequences that did not end his career but reshaped it. He was required to step back, to attend corrective leadership programs, to submit to oversight. It was not mercy without cost, nor punishment without purpose. It was a recalibration. Alara was offered protection, mentorship, and the choice to stay or leave with support. She chose to stay, not because the building felt safe yet, but because she wanted to reclaim the daylight. Healing did not arrive all at once. Alara's days became steadier, her shoulders loosened, she spoke more in meetings, her voice gaining strength. She learned that courage could be quiet and still change outcomes. Tomas continued to check in, a constant reminder that kindness often works backstage. Rowan, for his part, began to speak differently at daytime town halls, acknowledging gaps, emphasizing responsibility. Change did not erase the past, but it redirected the future. Months later, Alara stood by the window during a lunch break, sunlight warming the glass, the city humming below. The words that once haunted her had softened into a memory that no longer commanded her body. "Please don't hurt me" had been answered not by silence, but by systems nudged toward humanity. She understood now that wealth and power could distort rooms, but they could also be held to account when ordinary people refused to look away. If this story touched your heart, if it reminded you that kindness can interrupt harm, and that daylight can bring both truth and healing, please take a moment near the end of this video to like, comment, share, and subscribe to Wisdom of Kindness. Your engagement tells the algorithm that stories of compassion matter. Special request before we end, please comment the word kindness if you believe courage grows when people stand together. Alara walked out of the building that afternoon into full sun, breathing deeply, feeling the simple grace of being unafraid. The city did not applaud, there were no headlines, but somewhere between the glass tower and the open street, a life had shifted, and the daylight felt earned.